Welcome to the Her Story Circle podcast, the podcast that brings you the extraordinary tales of everyday women who are changing the world. I'm your host, Cherise Ncube, and I'd like to acknowledge traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. I also like to pay my respects to elders, past, present, and emerging. Every week, we dive into the lives, challenges, and triumphs of women from all four corners of the globe. We're here to inspire, enlighten, and connect, sharing stories that uplift and empower. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and join us as we explore the incredible journeys of women shaping our future. This is Her Story, where every woman's voice matters. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story Circle. This is Cherise Ncube here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia. And as you know, the Her Story Circle is bringing you stories from women from all over the world, young and old. Today, it gives me great pleasure to introduce a new member to our tribe. Welcome, welcome, welcome to the tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Hello everyone, my name is Cherise Ncube. I'm based in Vermont South in Melbourne and I'm 17 years old. So my story started when my family actually moved here to Australia when I was 8. So we moved from South Africa and I came here and I loved it. We went to the Melbourne Zoo, all the hotspots, the Star and everything. And it was just great. And I love it here. Everyone's really lovely. There's so many different cultures and it's a great place to be. So my story really started to begin though when I started the schooling system. So at the time I was in year 2 and I started to notice small little, I guess you could call them microaggressions, small comments made about how dark I was, small comments made about how I look like poo, things like that. And of course the kids didn't mean any harm by it, but it made an impression on me and how I perceived myself. And when I actually turned 13, I was at high school at that point. And I started to experience really, really racist acts. People were saying the N-word and other slurs. And I reported this, obviously, to my teachers, but nothing was done. And with the help of my family, I kept reporting it to the higher-ups and the higher-ups and the higher-ups at that school until I got to the principal. And the principal actually asked me, what tone were they saying the N-word in? They might have not meant to harm you by saying these words. And I think that was a real reality check for me. I was like, wow. So now you're not even going to try and help me when people are being rude to me, when they're saying things that are just unacceptable. It's blatant racism. So that's when I really saw that this issue was kind of still within Australia, despite how lovely it is here and how many different cultures we have. There's still an issue in terms of embracing and celebrating diversity and difference. So after that, I started immersing myself in African Australian communities. And it was actually on a Zoom call with a bunch of primary school children where I heard similar stories to mine by children who were even younger. And mind you, I was 13. I was very young myself. So then I started to think, what can I do to help my community? How can I aid this issue that's so prevalent in our society? And that's what led to the production of my book. So my book actually follows school children who are eating their lunch and they're traveling through the globe through their lunches. And it's all about celebrating difference and diversity and just enjoying each other's company without the issues that are so prevalent in today's society, And for me, I noticed that the schools and the government do try, but the issue is that they try to address the issue of racism when we're in high school. And by then, children have already created their own sets of views, values, perceptions, and they've already had impressions on how to act, the different things they can say. And that is an issue because it means they haven't targeted the right age group. So that's why I really drew it back to children who were very young, of the ages of 4 to around 10. And just to really install this sense of, celebration of difference and diversity. I mean, we live in Australia, we live in Melbourne. We have so many different cultures. It's about time we celebrated them all and made sure that everyone felt safe, feels safe, and celebrated for who they are, where they come from, their religion, and so on. Because it's the differences that make Melbourne so great, you know? So, yeah, so that's what really led to the production of my book. And yeah, as time went on, I think I started to really notice these issues even more, because now that I was thinking about it, I would see these comments being made, I would see people acting in a certain way. And yeah, I think now to backtrack a little bit more about me as a person is I actually was swimming at this time. So I represented Victoria at national age. So this was when I was in year 6. I was around 12. And swimming was my big thing from the ages of about 10 until like 14. And it really helped me grow as a person, build my character, and just to have the fighting mindset and to keep pushing on. So I think that's really what helped me, even when I was at school and all these things were happening to me, to keep pushing and to keep trying and to keep growing. And yeah, just to not back down despite the fact that the school wasn't really helping me. And of course, I moved schools and now I'm at a school that I really love and enjoy. And I'm in year 12 now. So it's been quite a while since back then when I was 13. I'm 17 now. But yeah, so I think I've really grown as a person and I've been able to use my experience to help others who are experiencing similar things. But I think it still stands that it's not right, that that experience is even there to begin with, that I had to go through something like that. And that's really what I'm trying to address with my book. And I've been able to utilize other pathways as well. Through school, I've had things like Youth of the Year awards and awards like that, where I've been able to really raise awareness. So I think the real takeaway from this is just to really spread love and celebrate diversity and difference. For me, that's what it's all about. Yeah.
Oh man, I am so sorry that you went through this experience. Listening to you speak reminds me of my childhood. So you and I both come from Zimbabwe. I grew up in Rhodesia way before you were born. I'm probably your parents' age. And I went to an all-white school. Everything you've said, I experienced. And
Yeah.
you can imagine back then when you're living in a racist country where even the government is endorsing racism,
Yeah.
it's not easy. And for this to be happening in Australia, it's quite sad to hear. What I am proud of is that you have taken the experience and turned it into something beautiful. And you are empowering children to start celebrating diversity at a very, very early age. And I think that's where it really starts, because when little kids are small, they're not racist. These are things that they are taught in their
Exactly.
homes by their parents. And if the school system is also allowing it to happen, it just reinforces it, right?
Yeah.
So, my first question for you is, how do you believe representing diverse backgrounds and religions in your books impact young readers?
I think when I was younger and I was engaged in media, cartoons, books, it was always, the typical white person. It was always someone with blonde hair, blue eyes, things like that. And I felt that I wasn't seen. And then what I perceived as what's normal, what's pretty, what's desirable was that. When in reality, we're all desirable, we're all lovely in our own ways. So I hope that putting people of different races, different cultures, different, ethnicities, anything, in my book will allow them to feel seen and, seen as someone who is worthy, someone who's powerful in their own right, desirable in their own right, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really important for children to see themselves as being represented in literature and in books.
Yes.
So, can you share the process of crafting stories that are both engaging and educational for young children about diversity and inclusion?
Yeah, so this was actually a 2-year process for me. So it started around when I was 14 and I published a book at 16. So it
Right.
started with just brainstorming, thinking, okay, what could this be about? How are we going to make it interesting? Because that's the first thing. How is it even going to be engaging before you add the educational factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we were just brainstorming, and I was actually brainstorming with my older sister, right? Just coming up with ideas. Then we had the idea of a school setting, like lunchtime. So then,
Yes.
okay, how do we take it to the next step now? How do we add the educational stuff? And I just thought of my friends. I have a lot of Asian friends because it's an Asian dominated area. And they were always sharing the stories of how when they at school, people would make fun of the smell of their lunches and how
Mm,
their lunches would look and stuff like that. That was a common experience of theirs. And I thought, what if we take this experience and turn it into something positive? So
mhm.
now people who are sharing their lunches and they're eating their lunches all together. And through their
Yes.
lunches, they're actually sharing their cultures, their experiences, what makes them them. So that's
Yes.
really where it came from.
I
Then, so
love.
once the idea, oh yeah, thank you. Once the idea was there, now it's about scripting, editing, getting an artist, writing, editing again, then getting it out there. So that was a long process. That's what took the most time. I
Yes.
did the sketches myself because I do dabble in a little bit of art.
I love
So
that.
yeah, I did the sketches, then added words, and then obviously it's a kid's book, so I was like, it has to be some kind of educational rhyming kind of thing. So the
Yes.
rhyme scheme, but still having the message across. So that
Uh,
was that. Then I had my mom's help to find someone who could do the illustrations.
okay.
And eventually it all came together in March when I was 16, and the book was published. So last year, yeah. And it
Oh,
was just
wow.
such a relieving feeling to have it out there after all, like the process was really rewarding as well,
Yeah.
to get to that final product, it was just great.
Love it. Listening to you speak, you actually tapped into a very deep African way of being. There is a proverb in Shona that says, "Ukama igasha,
Oh,
rinosungwa nechikafu." And the literal translation is, friendships are like fabric that are woven together with the breaking of bread. So in our culture, we believe that until you share a meal with someone else, you're not really a friend.
oh
So you
wow.
intuitively you tapped into who we are as a people, as an African people. The sharing of food is really what binds relationships together.
Yeah.
So kudos to you. This is all in your DNA. You didn't even know
Yeah.
it. You tapped into a very, very rich part of who African people are. Until
Mm,
you've shared a meal with someone, you're not really a friend. So I love what you've done with your book.
thank you.
So, which one of your stories is your favorite? And what is the key message you hope children will take away from it?
So our special lunch is the story that I think really has a great impact. And I really hope the message that will be taken away from that will be just to be kind. It's cool to be kind. I think that's the most important thing. There's this thing in today's society where people are scared almost to be nice and it's not seen as something desirable. But it's cool to be kind, and we should be proud of ourselves for being good people. It should be something that comes to us naturally as well. It's cool to be kind. And that's what I'm really trying to push through this, through the celebration of difference and diversity. It's just about making sure people are kind to each other. And that way we
Yes.
can all enjoy our experiences in school, outside of school, everywhere. We shouldn't have to feel the way that people do end up feeling. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some of the challenges that you face when writing children's books that encompass a wide range of diversities?
Yeah, I think for me, I had to do a lot of research, obviously, to make sure that I'm
Yes.
not fitting into stereotypes, because that's the last thing I'd want to do. To actually
Mhm.
research on what kind of foods do people actually eat, and not just the surface level of what we see on like TV and stuff like that. And then even when it came to names, you wanted it to be, you know, true to where that the person's from, because I had characters from India, China, you know, South Africa, characters all over, right?
Okay.
Greece. So it was important to really make sure, yeah, the profiles fitted that person really well. So I had to
I
do a
love
lot of research in that. I think that was the most difficult, but it was rewarding in itself because I was learning about different cultures, and it's always fun and exciting to do that, you know, to understand people better. Yeah.
It's awesome. So, how do your books facilitate conversations between children and adults about respecting and celebrating differences?
Yeah, I think my book, in the way that it's made, it's about you know, this child brought this, let's share it. This child brought this, let's share it. And obviously, these children won't know what everything is. So even in the fact that the parents will have to take that themselves to be able to teach these children that, oh, this is this dish from this country, and you know, that kind of connection between the child and parent in that way, I think is really good, because it's about, you know, teaching each other about cultures, different ways of living. Because I have some who eat with chopsticks, some who eat with their hands, some who
Yeah.
have the fork, some who have like little sticks, stuff like that, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's what it does. It builds a connection in that way. Yeah.
So, what has been the most memorable feedback you've received from young readers or parents about your books?
Most memorable feedback, I got a comment because the book's up on Amazon, and I got a
Mhm.
review that said something along the lines of, this is a really great book. I hope that there'll be a sequel that dives into other things and other cultures, other parts of cultures, such as something
Mhm.
like clothing, I'm assuming, or things like that, that a core part of, you know, people, because it's really just amazing to see this being talked about and celebrated in such a positive way between so
Yeah.
many cultures. And I think one thing I find is a lot of literature that's meant to be diverse tends to have two or three different cultures that maybe are even from a similar group, you know? Whereas
Yes.
my book really touches across the world. And I think that's what Melbourne is to me as well. When I'm in Melbourne, I see just so many people from so many different places. And I wanted
Yeah.
that to be really a core part of my book. So I think, yeah, that's
Yeah.
something
Melbourne
that's,
is a melting pot. It really is a melting pot of nations. And we
yes,
really have
yes.
to celebrate all these differences. That is awesome. So, who influences or inspires? Who are your influences or inspirations in the field of children's literature, particularly in diversity and inclusion? Were there any books you had ever read? What was the whole influence around writing for you?
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I actually can't remember the book name, but my mom
Mhm.
sent me a TikTok, and it was off this book of a girl who was like, I can do anything I wanted. And it was an African American girl, and it was
Right.
her being like, I can be an astronaut, I can be a doctor, I can
Yeah.
be a cook, I can be, and it just kept going, and it was a list of things she could do. And it was her with a helmet on, with goggles on, you know, like things like that. And what really stood
Yes.
out to me was her huge afro.
Okay.
I was
Okay.
like, this is like authentic. This is true, you know? This is
Yeah.
our African genes being shown in literature, and it's us being powerful women, you know?
Yeah.
I think it
And
was
just
actually
celebrate
like me can
that,
do
right?
anything. Yeah, exactly. Celebrating that. And the idea that, you know, this child is being told she can do anything. And I feel like sometimes that isn't done enough for us as children, us Black women, when we're young. We have a lot of, you know, pre assumed things that we're meant to do. But this
Mhm.
was just about, no, you can do anything. There's no limitations because of anything. And that's what
I
really inspired me. Yeah.
Just talking to you, I'm reminded again of my own childhood. Because of the racism that I experienced at school, none of the kids would play with me. So I
Oh, wow.
became a prolific reader. because nobody would play with me. And that's what made me into an author, a writer, a speaker. So
Yeah.
sometimes the worst things that happen to you in your life are in your path to actually show you your biggest gifts, your talents. And I also remember that in my childhood, it wasn't easy to stand out. And my dad forced me to do public speaking in high school. And I
Yeah.
ended up competing with seniors. When I was 13, I was competing with 18-year-olds and winning the regional Midlands
Oh,
competition.
wow.
From
Yeah.
Gweru, I come from the same area. And I was on those stages with the big boys, the big girls, and winning the first prize. But these
That's
challenges come
amazing.
for a reason, to show you what your strengths are. And it's really
Definitely.
inspiring to see that you found this part of yourself that you can now harness and use. So, have you read any African literature that could inspire you even more? Have you
I
found
haven't.
any writers?
Yeah, I haven't yet, and I think that's something I really need to get on to because I'm in school, by the way. I'm still in year
Yes.
12. So when I
Okay.
made the book, I was in year 10 when it was published. So school has kept me busy. I haven't been reading as much as I used to when I was younger, right? So,
Yeah.
but now I think it's time to really like immerse myself in African literature and enrichen my knowledge of, our history, our,
Yeah.
heritage, things that just make us who we are. And I think that's the next step for me. Yeah.
I'm going to recommend an author who changed my life. His name is Ngugi wa Thiong'o.
Mm,
Ngugi is from Kenya. And I was probably 15 years old when I first read his first book. And it was one of our English teachers who came from the UK. And Kwekwe is a very hot town. Your parents come from Gweru. I come from
yeah.
Kwekwe. Gweru is quite high, it's altitude wise, so it's freezing cold there in winter. But in
Yeah.
Kwekwe, it's always hot, right? And this English teacher took us outside and he made us lie on the grass under a tree. And he read two books or sections of a book. One was Wilfred Owen's First World War Poetry. So that was a British author. And the other one was Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And
Mm,
these two authors impacted me in a really big way. Um, Wilfred Owen wrote the kind of poetry where if you close your eyes, you could feel like he was painting pictures with his words.
yeah.
He had a very, very intricate way of describing the war, and it impacted the way that I write poetry now. And then Ngugi wa Thiong'o writes English in an African way. So, when you come from
Ooh,
a certain culture, the way we string words together, the way we articulate words, even in a foreign language, can still be infused with your Africanness. Does that make
mhm.
sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I read Ngugi's books, it was like I could hear Shona, my mother tongue, in English.
Yeah.
Although he's Kikoi, so he's from Kenya, speaks a different African language, but it was such a rich way of fusing my Africanness into English literature.
Yeah.
If you ever get an opportunity to read one of Ngugi wa Thiong'o's books, Devil on the Cross was the first book that I read. And it again changed the way I write in English, but infusing my Shona culture, my Africanness into English literature.
And that's really lovely, because that's what it's about, taking like parts of us. Because, of course, now that English side is part of your identity, but you always have your roots in, your Shona self and you speaking Shona, and that's part of your identity. And yeah, that's really cool, to be able to express both sides of you and parts
Exactly.
of you. Yeah.
So with intersectionality, it's all of the aspects of who you are, right? Like
Mm,
you, I lived in South Africa as well for 7 years before I came to New Zealand. I've lived in 7 countries.
Oh,
So
wow.
the first one was the UK, Norway, South Africa, New Zealand, United States, and now Australia. So wherever you've lived, you have taken on these cultures, you've taken on the
Yeah,
languages. They're all a part of who you are. You can't run away from the fact that you're living in Australia, speaking English every day, but those other aspects of you can be woven into that still. So
exactly.
I would
Yeah.
to see what you're going to come up with next in terms of your writing. This is
Thank
very,
you.
very exciting that I'm meeting you today. So, are there any specific themes or stories that you're planning to explore in your upcoming books?
Yeah, I think I'm really going to stick with children's literature and continue on that path. And I would like to continue, obviously, with the celebration of diversity and inclusion being the core part of my books.
Yes.
I'm thinking of doing some sequels, something to do with maybe occupations, or even something like, I want to be this, I also want to be this, and we can both be this. That kind of message of, I think, just being together and being able to support each other despite any kind of differences, because the differences is what makes us so great. I think that's what I really want to push into my literature. Yeah,
And it's that celebration of the differences. If we can
exactly.
get more people to just celebrate that we are different but the same. I love that.
Exactly. Yeah,
Absolutely
exactly.
love it. So, what advice would you give to aspiring authors who wish to write children's books, particularly for those focusing on diversity and inclusion?
I'd say, honestly, think about your experiences and put that into what you needed when you were going through that. Because for me,
Yes.
my thing was that I was 13. I was really young when this was happening to me. And of course, there were things prior to that that were just comments being made on the street, things like that. But this was the first time it was people in my like age group. So
Yes.
I was like, if I was me back then and I had something that was a light read, something that just made me feel accepted as a person and celebrated as a person, that would have been amazing. So yeah, that's my advice for other people who are trying to create something similar, especially in the realms of diversity and difference and celebrating that. Yeah, think about your story and how you've come to be and what you needed when things were happening to you. Yeah,
Yes.
that's it. And then just
I
get it
love,
out there. Yeah.
you've actually
Just
inspired me to get my books out now. I have three children's books that I've been kind of dabbling in. One is
yeah.
finished and done. So I'm now a grandmother. I have a little grandson who is 2.5
Oh,
years
yeah.
old, and he is obsessed with mushrooms. So whenever we take him to the park, when the other kids are playing on the swings, Matty is playing and looking for mushrooms in the bush.
That's so
So
cute.
I wrote a book called The Mushroom Hunter, and I published that for his
Oh,
birthday last year.
that's so
And I'm
lovely.
also working on a book called My Black is Beautiful, and it's
Mm,
celebrating the different hues of colors of our Black skin. African people have such a wide range of Black and brownness that
yeah.
we need to celebrate. So, My Black is Beautiful is all about our skin color. And then I'm looking for a title. You might help me with this for the third book. And it's called, I read a quote that said something like, it's to do with our hair. And you know
Oh,
how
yeah.
our hair stands up? My hair is a big fluffy afro if I don't have my braids in.
Yeah.
And I feel that our hair defies gravity. So the book was something like,
Yes.
my hair defies gravity. You can't tell me that I'm not magical. Something to that. I can't remember the
Hmm.
exact quote, but
Yeah.
that's what I want to talk about. It's about skin color and our hair and the beautiful ways we can braid our hair and the science behind African braids as well. There's a lot of mathematics that goes into hair braiding that
Yeah. I never
myth.
thought about it
Um,
like that.
Yeah, the geometric designs, like if you look at cornrows, the precision that people do those intricate cornrows. It's all mathematics,
Yeah.
but we don't celebrate ourselves in that way. So those are my books. You've inspired me to get off my backside and get them published. I would
Because,
love to.
when it's out there, you feel so good about it, It's just like, yeah. And I think lots of people spend a lot of time thinking like, am I like credible enough for me to be posting these things and putting it out there? But for me, it was like, I had nothing. Like, I was 16, I had nothing out there, nothing like going for me that would make me seem like I had the credibility to write. But at the end of the day, it's about your message. And if you love writing, it'll show. It'll show through your book. Yeah.
Comes through. It really comes through.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
this has been a real honor for me to meet you today and to share this time with you and to share you with our community. My vision and my passion for this podcast is to bring people from all walks of life, young and old. You're the youngest person I've interviewed for this podcast. And I'm so proud that you're from Zimbabwe and would really want to speak with you and follow your progress and see how you're doing in Australia. Thank you so much for coming on today. And thank you to everybody who has tuned in today. The Her Story Circle brings you stories that are uplifting, powerful, and bold. So tune in again tomorrow when I interview yet another amazing person. In the meantime, have a fantastic day, morning, or evening, wherever you are in the world, and bye for now. And I need to share your website.
Yeah.
Let's have it at the bottom of the screen. If anybody wants to look up this amazing young author, please buy her books, follow her through social media, go onto Amazon, get this book for your children. And thank you, everybody. I will see you again tomorrow. Have a fantastic day. Thank you for tuning into the Her Story Circle podcast. I hope today's story has inspired you to believe in the power of our stories and the difference you can make in the world when you use your voice. I'm Gertrude Mache, and it's been an honor to share this space with you, where voices from all walks of life come together to weave a rich tapestry of diverse perspectives. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast to help us share these stories with more listeners. Follow us on social media by looking for the Her Story Circle podcast for more updates. And join us tomorrow for another episode filled with courage, resilience, and empowerment. Remember, your story matters, and together we're building a stronger, more inclusive world. Until next time, keep